we depend this thing about America, Russia, and the other parts of the world. Well, I want you to listen to this. I think I played it. No, I don't think I played it yet, but I want you to listen to this.
I've only got time to turn to the funniest story of the week. Joe Biden is currently holding a democracy summit in southern Africa. That's right, in the very place where the United States and the United Kingdom and France and all the other so-called West supported racist, apartheid, white supremacist states right up until the very end. Margaret Thatcher, I was there, saw her lips move, called Nelson Mandela a common terrorist. The United States took Mandela off the terrorist list in 2008. In the 18th year of his presidency of the Republic of South Africa. And I got to thinking when I saw a very harrowing picture posted by one of my friends on Twitter earlier this evening. It's a picture that deserves to be seen far more widely. You'll find it on my Twitter feed. It's a picture of the Congo's first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, half naked, in shackles, being pushed down aircraft steps by a Belgian military officer after his overthrow in a coup organized and executed by Britain, Belgium, and the United States of America. The newly elected President Jack Kennedy knew nothing of this coup, and the CIA defied him, lied to him, and conducted this coup behind their new president's back. But it happened. The CIA, MI6, and the hated Belgian colonist government that was finally having to leave power took this fine man, probably the greatest of all African leaders, and murdered him. They then dismembered him. They then dissolved him in acid and sent one of his teeth back to Brussels for safekeeping, for DNA. It was only returned to the Congo last year. The West murdered Patrice Lumumba. The West helped keep Nelson Mandela in prison for 27 years, most of them on Devil's Island, Robben Island, in the dungeons of apartheid. The West supported racist apartheid rule in the very southern Africa they're now holding a summit in to tell Africans how important their democracy is. There's the picture of the hero, Patrice Lumumba, being led down the steps of that aircraft to his death, his dismemberment, and his dissolving in acid. You couldn't make it up. And they wonder why Africans are utterly unmoved at their pleas to reject China and Russia and embrace them instead. China never occupied a square inch of Africa. Russia never occupied a square inch of Africa. As a matter of fact, when the West was supporting apartheid and white supremacist rule in southern Africa, it was the Russians who were arming, financing, and providing the diplomatic skeleton, backbone for the worldwide activities of the anti-apartheid movement, of the movement for liberation in southern Africa. I have many times spoken at the Patrice Lumumba University for the Friendship of the Peoples. It's not in San Francisco, it's not in London, and it certainly isn't in Brussels. It's in Moscow. It's in Russia. I have been there, spoken there many times. Does that little vignette not explain something to you, the viewers, and the wider public about why the Africans will never hate Russia, will never hate China? China is building roads, railways, terminals, ports, harbors, infrastructure all over Africa. All the so-called West did was loot it and steal even the people of Africa themselves, chain them in the holds of ships, sailed them through the Middle Passage, tossing thousands of them overboard when they died as food for the sharks, and then those lucky enough to reach land were placed as beasts of burden in chains as slaves. You want Africans to support you, Mr. Biden, Mr. Sunak, Miss von der Leyen, Mr. Borrell, the people you just described as the people of the jungle while you sat in your garden. How does your garden grow now, Mr. Borrell? Have you seen the streets of France?
I want to tell you, so the cry of the people, them is still heard, really pouncing, echoing across waters and through the air and everywhere. But the leaders of the world, trust me, them ball out, said them want peace, but it's war. It's war them a defend. And we see that all over the place. There's nation rising against nation. You know, them say crime gone down, but we are, according to them statistics, Jamaica is the 10th most violent, murderous country in the world. 10th, you know. Yeah, them do ever call 18 at the 10th. Them do ever call 18 at the 10th, you know. And 8 is supposed to be the poorest country in the region. Them not call 18 at the 10. Them call Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana in the 10. It's amazing, man. It's amazing. When time we do things, we go to the extreme and do it. I don't know how much I have follow the American news them, but the big thing that happen is that there's a channel named Fox Channel. For those of you who don't know Fox Channel, it's like CNN, where from the election at Trump till now, a pure lie them a tell, say Donald Trump a thief, the Democrats them thief the election, that's why Biden win. So them go to court with the people them who responsible for the voting machine them, who them claim say are the machine them rig up the election. And the machine people them win the case against Fox for $700 million. The next thing is where the 21-year-old youth in the army, where they bust out America's secret on the internet and in some little, where them call the place them where could pick the go play on the computer. Some 21-year-old youth bust it out. They all over on the internet and all them way there. Yes, some whole heap of different things are going. So I want to play this clip here. I want to play this clip here. I want to play it for the people them. It come from democracy now. Yes.
We end today's show looking more at the recently leaked Pentagon documents, which have revealed secrets about the war in Ukraine, as well as U.S. spying on its adversaries and allies, including Israel and South Korea. The BBC reports one document shows dozens of special forces from Western nations, including the U.S., are operating inside Ukraine. The document, which was marked top secret, says the U.K. has 50 special forces, Latvia 17, France 15, U.S. 14, and the Netherlands has 1. The Pentagon and Justice Department are investigating the source of the leak. On Tuesday, I interviewed James Bamford, a longtime investigative journalist, author focused on the intelligence community. In 1982, he published The Puzzle Palace, the first book exposing the inner workings of the NSA, the National Security Agency, like many times larger than the CIA. His latest book, just out, is called Spy Fail: Foreign Spies, Moles, Saboteurs, and the Collapse of America's Counterintelligence. I asked Jim Bamford to talk more about what the documents reveal about the Ukraine war, among other issues.
Well, I think it paints a clearer picture of what actually is happening over there. There's been the problem on cable news, both Fox, CNN, MSNBC. You get a lot of people that are pro-war, and they're the Congress members of Congress, senators, and so forth, and they're all giving these upbeat accounts of how well it's going for Ukraine. The documents give a far more realistic view, saying that basically it's going to come down to a stalemate. There is not going to be any big winners necessarily, and the Ukrainians are in a very bad position because they're not getting enough ammunition. The Russians have much more access to ammunition than the Ukrainians do. So there's a switch between the way America perceives the war, I think, to these documents, which give a more realistic, because it's done with intelligence, more realistic view of how the war is going.
There's some interesting findings in these documents that have been released. One, The Guardian points out, one slide suggested a small contingent of less than 100 special operations personnel from NATO members France, America, Britain, and Latvia were already active in Ukraine. Talk about the significance of that.
Well, that's what the Russians have been charging for a long time, that the U.S. is more heavily involved, or not just the U.S., but NATO and our NATO partner countries have been involved far more closely and far more directly with the war than is led to believe by the government, by the Biden administration. So it adds to the weight of those charges that the U.S. and its allies and the NATO partners are more heavily involved in this war, and that's a very dangerous situation since you've got nuclear powers involved, Russia, the United States, France, and so forth, all nuclear powers, and we're all fighting over this one piece of territory, and it keeps getting more and more out of hand. So I think that's a very big danger.
The New York Times points out military analysts said the documents appear to have been modified in certain parts from their original format, overstating American estimates of Ukrainian war dead and understating estimates of Russian troops killed. The modifications could point to an effort of disinformation by Moscow, the analyst said.
Well, that's a bit of an overstatement. I think what actually happened, I mean, if you read closely, the documents the documents were original. They were placed on the internet in their original form. And then what apparently happened was somebody copied some of those documents, and then they altered a bit of the numerical equivalence of how many died on which side and so forth. So the documents are real. The documents are not disinformation. Somebody apparently took some of those documents, a couple of them, and crudely changed a few numbers, but it doesn't affect the overall value of the documents that were released.
Another point the New York Times makes, the Russian military may be flailing, but the private Wagner mercenary group, led by an ally of President Vladimir Putin of Russia, is flourishing in much of the world. Wagner is working to thwart American interests in Africa and has explored branching out to Haiti, right under the nose of the United States. Jim Bamford.
Well, that's been going on for quite some time. It's not just Russia, it's China has been working hard in Africa to develop. I mean, as the U.S. has been bombing Middle Eastern countries and spending trillions and trillions of dollars on these useless wars, we get into the Chinese and the Russians to a large degree have been spending billions of dollars ingratiating themselves with African countries, building bridges, building roads, and so forth. So it's not a big surprise that virtually none of the African countries have joined in the embargo of Russia or the sanctions, and that's why the Vice President Harris flew over to Africa to try to bring back some of that goodwill that we have been squandering while we've been launching wars in the Middle East.
And then, quoting the Washington Post, the documents also demonstrate what's long been understood but never publicly spelled out. The U.S. intelligence community has penetrated the Russian military and its commanders so deeply that it can warn Ukraine in advance of attacks and reliably assess the strengths and weaknesses of Russian forces. A single page in the leaked trove reveals the U.S. intelligence community knew the Russian Ministry of Defense had transmitted plans to strike Ukrainian troop positions in 2 locations on a certain date in February, and that Russian military planners were preparing strikes on a dozen energy facilities and an equal number of bridges in Ukraine. James Bamford.
Yeah, those are the most significant, I think, of all the revelations, because there's only really 2 ways that the U.S. could have gotten that intelligence. One is through signals intelligence, the NSA, and the other is through human intelligence, basically the CIA. So in either of those cases, what the Russians are going to do once they learn this is do an extensive mole hunt and analysis of their communications. So the mole hunt, they'll be looking for any humans that might be assisting the United States by telling them this information about what the dates and the times of these planned operations, and they'll be checking all their communications facilities, changing their codes and so forth, in case we're getting this information by eavesdropping on their communications, by the NSA picking it up. So in either case, it's bad news for the United States, because we may be losing that whatever source it was that we were getting that information from.
And one of the things NBC pointed out was a February 28th document assessing pathways for Israel to provide lethal aid to Ukraine, providing hypothetical situations that might drive Israel from its balancing act between Kyiv and Moscow. Marked secret, the document also suggests what Israeli weapons could be transferred to Ukraine, like Israel's Javelin equivalent and other missile systems. The analysis says the most plausible scenario is that Jerusalem adopts a Turkish model under U.S. pressure. Like Ankara, it would mean that Israel sells lethal defense systems or provides them through third-party entities while openly advocating for peace and offering to host mediation efforts. James Bamford.
Well, once again, it shows how widespread the NSA's eavesdropping capabilities are in terms of picking up what's going on within the Israeli Knesset and the Israeli president's office and so forth, or prime minister's office. So it shows the wide variety of how much we're eavesdropping. The United States has been pushing Israel to get more heavily involved in the supply of weapons to and technology to Ukraine, but Israel doesn't want to do it because it doesn't want to anger Russia. Russia is sort of turning a blind eye to Israel's attacks in Syria, and they're afraid that if they overtly aid Ukraine to a much greater extent, then Russia will be angry at Israel and not allow Israel basically to send its fighters into Syria anymore. So it's a complicated situation, but the United States is apparently able to eavesdrop on decisions that are made within the Israeli government.
And also this latest news out of these documents that Mossad, Israel's spy agency, the equivalent of the U.S. CIA, was pushing Israelis and fomenting a rebellion against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for gutting the Israeli judiciary.
Well, it shows that we're also eavesdropping on their equivalent of the CIA, basically, the Mossad. And in my book, Spy Fail, I write extensively about how we eavesdrop on Israel. I mean, there's a huge building in the outskirts of Washington, D.C., in Maryland, where the Hebrew linguists are all gathered, and they eavesdrop on whatever communications goes in and comes out of the Israeli embassy. So the U.S. does a great deal of eavesdropping on Israel, both within Israel and of its diplomatic facilities in the U.S.
And just to refresh our audience's memory, we last had you on, Jim, as we talked about Spy Fail, your new book, and your revelations about Benjamin Netanyahu's interference with the 2016 election. The media made a lot of allegations that Russia was involved with subverting the U.S. elections in 2016. But just lay out once again for us what you learned about Netanyahu's efforts to support Trump in the 2016 election and the extent to which he went, something that is known by the U.S. government and Congress but not revealed.
Well, everybody remembers Russiagate and the hysteria that the news media, mainstream news media, basically focused on that for 2 years, looking under every rock for a Russian spy or Russian collaborator, and they never found any. There never was any collusion between the Trump administration and the Trump campaign and the Russian government. So the Mueller report came up with a blank when it came to Russian collusion. What people don't know, until I reported in my book, is the fact that the Mueller group, the Mueller investigation was not only looking at Russia, they were also looking at other countries that may have been involved in eavesdropping and spying within the U.S. and also being involved with campaigns. And what they found was that there was an Israeli agent who had been sent over by Prime Minister Netanyahu to collude with the Trump campaign. The idea was that the Israeli agent would pass on intelligence that the Israelis came up with to help this is intelligence on Hillary Clinton, to help the Trump campaign win. And the quid pro quo for that was that the Trump campaign, or President Trump, once he was elected, would recognize Jerusalem as being the sole, basically, possession of Israel. In other words, it wouldn't be divided between Israel and Palestine, which is always would have been the hope to have a peaceful resolution of that. It would be solely Israeli. So that was the deal. And I discovered this by coming across the actual affidavit, FBI affidavit, and search warrant. The search warrant was for the communications of this Israeli agent, and it laid out in the affidavit, the FBI affidavit, exactly how this plot took place. So it was extraordinary to see that all these 2 years they were doing this investigation on Russia and coming up empty, and they never revealed to the American public the fact that there was this Israeli agent who was deliberately attempting to throw the election for the benefit of Benjamin Netanyahu.
So going back, James Bamford, to these latest revelations, I'm wondering, I mean, you have been studying for decades, and Spy Fail, your new book, shows this, of course. I'm wondering what surprised you most, whether it's the scope of the documents across all of these agencies or where they were released on this gaming platform? The name released under, what is it, WOWMAO, WOWMAO. Was it the fact that the U.S. government didn't seem on top of it? I think Austin, the defense secretary, was just briefed last week. And what it means, I mean, if they're able to find, and do you think they'll find the person or persons involved with this?
Well, basically all those things surprise me. It's the first time I've ever seen documents leaked onto a gaming platform. But if I was to guess, just arbitrarily guess, as I mentioned before, there's basically 3 or 4 reasons why people steal secrets and make them and release them. One is that they're actual spies and they want to make money and they want to sell them to a foreign government. Another is that they have ideological reasons. They want to help a foreign government, so they leak it. They're not looking for money. They just leak it for ideological reasons. And a third reason is anger. They didn't get the promotion they wanted, or they aren't treated as well as they think they should be in the office. So to get back at the government.
Yes, I just play that. No, I will probably not really in line and in tune with what is going on, but it's a 21-year-old youth. 21-year-old youth really busts America's secret out there, whether deliberately or not, but the amount of information we give the world about what America was doing, including spying upon them own allies, spying upon Israel. America and Israel have the biggest connection and ties. Yet till America is spying on Israel. This is not something where I'm gonna bring up conspiracy theory, you know. It's all over the news. Them spying Israel, America is spying on Israel. America have agents in Russia. I tell the Ukrainian, it's like a proxy war, a fight. You know what proxy mean? Proxy means you're involved in something, but you make somebody else deal with that something for you. Yes, proxy. You're involved in something, but you make somebody else deal with where you are, deal with where you should have deal with. You make somebody else deal with it. And that is where I go on with America. It's really America fight the war, you know. Yeah, man, you know how much billions of dollars them send to Ukraine and how much ammunition, and them request ammunition from Germany, them request it from England, all over the place, them try to get it. Proxy war. You know, you fight a war and I go like, I fight the war and you're in the country, I shot down people and I drop bombs same way like it's your war. You know, see it, and now we see it is spreading. It's spreading because the Chinese them are back Russia. Cause you know them have a thing named BRIC. We've been talking about BRIC for years now. BRIC is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and America. And now we hear Saudi Arabia try to get involved with BRIC. And we hear even Mexico are trying to get involved with BRIC. So most of the country them are turn away from America because they realize America policy is America policy. It have nothing to do with nobody else but America. And that is really the problem. So China step in now like a big guy because China declare themselves bigger than America and them not care with all the talk, America talk, them no business. But it's a very interesting thing to say. Where meanwhile the Iranian them are come closer to the Arab them, and something are going on because the Iranian them are drop bomb in Syria and I kill American. And with the years, them never move out all of the American, they never move out all the American them. And them drop, must 3 times them drop bomb in Syria and kill and kill American. And the American them now start drop back bomb in Syria. But this man here where them supposed to get rid of how much years now, him still there around the place. Yes. Him still there around the place. So, and then America tried tells them on Taiwan side in the other part of the world there, where them have whole heap of arms are built up over there. So, and I say if China make a move against Taiwan, them are going to make a move too against China. It's wars are rumors of war. We want to play this. In this documentary, the man called Haile Selassie, Selassie, like C and Lassie, Selassie. I could say if it there. I could say. All right, here we go.
Do not underestimate the power of Tafari. He creeps like a mouse, but he has jaws like a lion. Haile Selassie, also named Ras Tafari, was a mild-mannered man who managed to unify Ethiopia in the mid-1920s, and was outcompeting his rivals to the point where he could proclaim himself leader. However, one man, Djazmak Balcha, a great warrior, openly refused to honor Ras Tafari summoned to Addis Ababa, to proclaim royalty to Selassie of all the warlords invited. Selassie then commanded him to Addis Ababa. He agreed, but went with 10,000 men to defend himself with the hidden intention of starting a civil war. He was invited to an afternoon bouquet by Selassie, but only agreed to go with a private bodyguard of 600 of his best men, which Selassie agreed. At the party he warned Selassie that if he did not return by nightfall his soldier will march on the capital and destroy it. Selassie was hurt by the mistrust. Nonetheless, he tries to charm Balcha as if he desperately needed his approval and friendship. But Balcha warned his men not to drink, as it was common that banquets were a great way to murder men of status by past kings. After the party, Balcha looked back on his shoulder as he was leaving the capital with plan of attack to recapture the capital and have Selassie either imprisoned or kill. When Balcha came close to where his men were camped, he noticed something had gone terribly wrong, as a place where colorful tents are stretched to as far as the eyes can see is now nothing but smokes from doused fire. What sort of devil's magic is this, he thought. A witness told him what had happened while he was away. That a large army commanded by Selassie ally sneaked up upon his soldiers through a side route he had not seen, but instead of fighting battle, they offered to pay any soldier willing to sell their weapons for gold and cash. Within few hours Balcha army were disarmed and scattered in different direction. Realizing his danger, Balcha tried to march south with his 600 army, but to his surprise the same men that were disarmed blocked his way, and the only way out is to march back to the capital. But Selassie had set up a large army to defend it. Like a chess player, Selassie predicted all of Balcha's moves and checkmated him. For the first time in Balcha's life he surrendered to repent of his sins. He agreed to enter the monastery. Thus Balcha's last words before entering was, "Do not underestimate the power of Tafari. He creeps like a mouse, but he has jaws like a lion."
Yes. Yeah, him creep like a mouse, but him jaws like him have a jaws like a lion. Very interesting. You know, I mean, when you look on Haile Selassie with him height and him just look frail, you'd have believe say you can just throw him around, but very powerful. Small package, but powerful. We must understand why Ras Tafari would have recognized a man like that. Especially in this time where it confuse a whole heap of people. Whole heap of people still confuse it. Why Haile Selassie? The question is asked all the while. Why Haile Selassie? Well, it's very difficult to explain to a man why Haile Selassie when a whole heap of ones never even read nothing about Africa or even Haile Selassie. So if you want to know why Haile Selassie, you have to really go into books. We talk about the man and even the autobiography of Haile Selassie. And even before that, you know, you have writings that you can refer to even before reading the autobiography of Haile Selassie. You have book before that. You know, we can recommend some to you, very important, because the confusion is still there among certain people. I say, so when we going to choose Haile Selassie, we want to never choose Marcus Garvey. I want to never choose this, I want to never choose that. It's a continuity in a history. Continuity in a history. Haile Selassie provide that continuity in the present and ancient past of Africa, being one of the old, not one, but the only country that had never been conquered by Europeans on the soil of Africa. I know you hear that story many times, but it's not too much time we can say it. He was able to keep Ethiopia free, even though exiled. He went back, and at the same time, the 5th of May him leave, and 5 years after the 5th of May him come forward and overpower the Italian them. And then they tried that before nothing in the Battle of Adwa, where them invade the same Italian them, and was kicked out by Menelik II. So Haile Selassie represent that continuity in our historical reference point, that a people must have a reference point. Them can't just come out of those pure supernatural, some little figurative talking. Rastafari is more than just imagining say this and imagining that. Is a real thing, real situation. Shouting it out, hail Jah Rastafari. Remember your duties. Be worthy of your ancestors. Do honor to yourself and to your family. For a long time, I'm going to put some clips in the program. Listen to this one now.
In the year 1684, the Vatican removed 14 books from the Bible. To this day, there is no explanation as to why, and the Vatican is happier with the general population not knowing. There were originally 80 books in the Bible when it was translated from Latin to English back in 1611. These days there are only 66. The missing books are known as the Apocrypha, which in Greek means hidden. The missing books include Esdras, Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, the Songs of the Three Holy Children, Bel and the Dragon, Maccabees, and the Prayer for Manasseh. Even stranger is that Jesus' name was spelled Aizas before these 14 books were removed. The church changed the pronunciation and spelling. If they had never changed anything, you'd pronounce Jesus' name as Yahushua. Why were these mysterious books removed? There are many theories. Some say the contents of the books didn't fit in with the Roman Catholic Church's narrative, and so they were simply taken out. Some believe they made the Bible too long and too confusing, so they were removed. But there is no real answer. None of the books were particularly nefarious, and they don't seem to include any secrets. But for whatever reason, the Catholic Church chose to remove them from the Bible so that the Word of God was exactly what they wanted it to be. Number 9.
Okay. That was a little historical reference. So, the Apocrypha, so much books in there. Well, people don't even know that. And you can buy the Apocrypha separate from the Bible, you know. If you go in one of them Christian bookstore, you can ask them if the Apocrypha is different from the Bible. Where it have in the Bible, not have it in. Like here the man talk about Maccabees. You have 1st and 2nd Maccabees, you know. Yes.
The informative information presented in this video is motivational and is positively aimed at inspiring, educating and entertaining the viewers with the cutting edge of critical reasoning. If you enjoy the contents on the Black Radar YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to show your support.